Welcome to this week's Real Estate Q&A, where I take 5 of the top comments and questions from our YouTube channel over the last week and address them. And we also talk about other things that are happening in the real estate market. But first up, we're going to talk about how Austin, Texas is said to be at the epicenter of the U.S. housing market correction, according to Zillow back in July of 2022. And now prices in Austin are dropping 10 times faster than the national average, according to this article published last month by Newsweek. This article is great talking about Austin, but it's like most of the U.S. Home prices got too hot too fast, and before the pandemic, most people could afford the median priced home. And we know this because of the Housing Affordability Index that dates back 23 years ago, published by the National Association of Realtors. And as we look at this chart, guys, anything above the 100 line means that housing still remained affordable for most Americans. But look at what happened from 2020 through now. For the first time in 23 years, guess what? Housing isn't affordable for the median income households. Now, what brings Austin into the epicenter for price correction? Well, according to this article, due to Austin's favorable tax policies, it attracted tech companies like Google and Facebook, and people flocked from more expensive cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York, flushing the cheaper housing market with cash. And guess what? That resulted in a surge in the cost of homes, with people willing to pay above asking price, all cash down. And by mid-22, prices were more than 75% higher in the city compared to before the pandemic, according to Redfin. And between July 22 and April of 2023, home prices in Austin fell by 10.2%. According to housing data analyst Moody Analytics, homes in Austin were overvalued 63.7% in the first quarter of 2022. And Redfin's chief economist says because prices have been so high, there was a lot of room for prices to fall. And a Redfin report shared with Newsweek showed that more home buyers were looking to leave Austin in the third quarter of the year than move into the city. And that's the first time on record there hasn't been a net inflow into the Texas capital, with data going back to 2017. And here is where this article really lost me. You see, Redfin's economist Fairweather says, I think the main driver of people leaving is that costs have gotten so high, especially for locals who are used to paying less for their rent, less for their property tax. They may be looking around and saying Austin's just too expensive. It's not only home prices that have gone up. All prices of goods like restaurants and gasoline, there's more demand, and that drives inflation up for the city overall. Duh, that's happening everywhere. Then an Austin Redfin agent is telling buyers this: I'm telling buyers that this is the first time in years they can get a deal on a house, even with higher mortgage rates. It's probably a better time to buy down than waiting for mortgage rates to drop, because once that happens, competition will escalate and prices will shoot up. Right now, buyers are able to take their sweet time, negotiate with sellers, and buy a home without getting into a wild bidding war. I guess Carmen, the Redfin agent here, is listening to their chief economist that is saying the price correction in Austin is over, but the new reality for the city is just that Austin is now a way more expensive place to live than it used to be. But we just read where people are flocking from Austin more than people are moving there. That's a negative domestic migration. Now, despite the 10.2% drop in home prices between July 2022 and April 2023, this Newsweek article published at the end of November says that according to Realtor.com, Austin, Texas is again at the epicenter for home price correction. And this article was published just 2 weeks after the article we just reviewed. And now this is saying that the Redfin economist is wrong, that the home price correction in Austin is not over. In fact, Realtor.com believes that Austin, Texas will see a 12.2% price decline in 2024. And that's along with 19 other cities on their list. St. Louis, Spokane, San Antonio, Dallas-Fort Worth, Portland, and Baton Rouge predicted to see some of the biggest declines. Here I think, guys, that one of the biggest missed drivers of potential price corrections across the country will be if the Fed actually drops interest rates like mainstream media is starting to tell us. And if we see 10-year bonds, treasury bonds, collapse a little bit and mortgage rates go into, let's just say, the fives, as some of these analysts are predicting, what they're really saying is that we have seen the bottom and that we'll start to see real estate prices increase. But let's look further into this Newsweek article, because here it says homeowners are hesitating to sell. All right. And it says the report also highlights a likely continuation of a lock-in effect where existing homeowners benefiting from lower mortgage rates secured in previous years are disinclined to sell, contributing to a persistently low supply of homes for sale. Now, here's the thing. If we see there's a pent-up seller demand, I hear it myself here at work. I talk to other real estate brokers that are talking to sellers, and they're all saying that sellers want to sell. There are a lot of people that have remorse that bought in the last several years. These people want to sell, but their golden handcuffs are these cheap interest rates. If the Fed drops the rates, I think the likely story here is that smart money, people that have money ready to buy a house, that have been saving, that have watched this whole housing market play out, this rush of overbuying, overinflated prices. I think these buyers now, when we start to see interest rates decline, sellers are going to flood the market. They're going to say, now's my chance to sell. And the inventory we're going to see inventory like we haven't seen in years, I believe. And these buyers now smarter, way smarter, because they can look back and see 2020 crystal clear, right? Not the year 2020, but our vision 2020. We look back in history now, we could see with crystal clear vision the mistakes that were made over the last several years. I think the buyers are going to be slow to do it again. And buyers will want even more price corrections from sellers flooding the market. So I don't think that dropping rates this go around will have the same effect on buyers like we never experienced before in the pandemic mode. Many buyers who reacted irrationally during this period have major buyer remorse and also may flood the market and try to sell should rates dip. So this would lead to more housing inventory on the market that we've seen in years, and this will go exactly against what a lot of people are saying as a lack of supply. We could see supplies increase over buyer demand. Here only time will tell, guys. I don't have a crystal ball, but what I can tell you is that we need to weigh out everything that you're hearing, the bulls in the market, the bears in the market, because look at the controversy that we just witnessed here, looking at 2 Newsweek articles 2 weeks apart from different economists, and they're polar opposites. Realtor.com believes in more price corrections in 24. Redfin's chief economist and obviously their agent believes that places like Austin have seen the bottom of price correction. And in, serving the housing market for 35 years in one way or another, I happen to be a little bit more bearish in the housing market. Obviously, you see that by our videos and our content. I'm not trying to tell you guys what to do. I'm just trying to say, look at the data, make decisions for yourself. But anyway, let's dive in to this week's comments and questions. So our first commenter is sort of echoing the fact that Austin is seeing such a massive exodus right now because a lot of people moved to Austin because they could work remotely. home prices were cheaper than a lot of other parts of the country. And they figured, hey, I could buy a house early on, save some money, even though the prices were going up every month. But they, if they got in early on, they could buy it cheaper than a lot of other areas in the country, and they could work remotely. But in a recent video that I did with Peter Schiff, you can find it on our channel here. It was a couple weeks ago. Great video. Peter Schiff has a wealth of knowledge on macroeconomics, and he actually predicted the 2008 housing crash. He was talking about it. They called him Dr. Doom. He believes that we're in a very precarious time right now. Great video to watch. But anyway, this commenter says, so that is why employers are wanting people to go back to the office building to work to save the commercial real estate market. It's no secret. We're talking in the news about how banks are in sort of really bad shape right now, regional banks, because of the collapse of office space. A lot of these loans are up for renewal. They're in default. The bank's probably going to get a lot of these back and really be stuck with some, major losses, maybe even as low as 25, 30 cents on a dollar. We could see in the commercial real estate market. The government is so concerned about it that they're coming up with this new program to help convert these office buildings to rentals, which we don't need because we're going to have a glut of multifamily inventory in the next 12 months anyway. But what's happened is we saw a decline in in-office employees, employees going to work every day in the office, even before the pandemic. The pandemic sort of just kind of escalated this along. But a lot of the employers, they're not calling their employees back because they want them to fill the office space. A lot of them are calling people back because they know that people aren't getting as much done working from home. Maybe at one point in time they did, when everybody was, working home during the pandemic. They were locked in their houses, but now people have really gotten lazy. I mean, they're laying in bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. Guys, if you're working from home, many of you can't deny what I'm saying, okay? There are people that can be more productive at home, and they'll argue that and fight that, but most employers are seeing their production going down. So I don't think, regardless of what was happening before, what we watched in the office space was that people didn't have their own individual office. So businesses were reducing the amount of space that they had prior to the pandemic because it's expensive space, and to heat and cool and, clean and, rent, honestly, per square foot. They realized that people don't need their own private offices like they did back in the 70s and 80s. People worked better in communal environments, with open workspaces and things like that. So I don't think they were ever intending on eliminating office space altogether, so much as they were just reducing their office space needs. Now, our next commenter is addressing the economy. They're going to fix the economy here. And actually, I like this. It says the economy is an easy fix. Don't spend more than your earnings. If you want to bring the jobs back, lower the corporate tax rate. How do you think China became a global power in such a short period? Businesses went overseas because of the high tax rate at home. All these other countries learned how to make things from the U.S. I've said this before on my shows. I can remember back in the 80s, everything was, mostly everything was stamp made in the USA. We had strong manufacturing here. And then somewhere around 1982, we only had about 1 out of 4 jobs that were offshored to manufacturing. Over the next 20 some years, that became 40% of our jobs offshored. We lost 4 million manufacturing jobs in a very short period of time here in the US, and we became more of a global economy. And then through that 20 some year period, really from maybe even a little bit longer, maybe getting into 40-year period, we watched home prices go up 310% and wages only increased 17%. But I do really appreciate what the commenter is saying here, is that we shouldn't spend more money than we have. Unfortunately, I don't feel that our federal government, state government, or even local governments believe that that's a possibility, because they want to spend what they want to spend and they want to print more money to do it. We don't have that choice. We can only get further into debt. Our next commenter is actually pulling back a video that we did quite some time ago. In 2021, Jeff Bezos somehow started or invested, or they used his name, whatever, started this fractional buying, home buying, company called Arrived. And basically for $100, you can invest in a fractional share of a home. When it first hit the market, it flooded, traffic to the website. It crashed the website, and it has been very successful where people are flooding into buying a portion of single family housing. And basically, a lot of people are angry right now because they feel like institutional investors have really stripped away the American dream of homeownership, because over a third of the buyers over the last several years have been institutional buyers, companies buying these single family houses to rent. And when we see a company like Amazon's founder being behind this company, where they want to gobble up now even more of the single family real estate away from the homeowners, turning us into a society of renters, not a society of owners, people are angry. But here it says that, this commenter says that a crime against humanity, insane how we got pitted against each other while they loot us. And I guess what they're saying is that, now we're fighting more than we ever have, right? I mean, it's, if you look at the political parties, the left against the right, I mean, people can't even stand each other and think objectively over, one person's opinion over another. And all the while that all of this unrest is happening between the Democrats and the Republicans, we're watching the American dream of like home ownership just being swept away from us. So I thought, coming into the holiday season, it would be really good to talk about this comment, that we may just kind of get along with each other and get back to the basics, that we want to see home ownership. We want to see people being able to pay their bills and get out of debt. And our next commenter is talking about landlording. I made a comment in my last Tuesday Night Live that, landlording wasn't easy. And we're seeing how the government is even weaponizing tenants with these different rules and regulations against the landlords. We watched it happen during the pandemic, where, the tenants didn't have to pay the landlords, but the landlords were required to pay their mortgages. There was no forbearance for these landlords. And what happened was a lot of these landlords, mom and pops, really got burned. They don't have corporate, investors, and, where, they basically could sustain losses and things like that for predetermined periods of time. So it was almost like, the landlords were attacked here in America by these tenants not needing to pay their rent while they were getting stimulus, by the way. But anyway, our commenter says here, and by the way, this is an avid follower, a supporter of our channel, really from the beginning. Shannon Davis says, being a landlord is not easy. It's one of the most difficult things anyone can decide to do with their life. I know because I've been renting for 20 years and never owned a home. But I do understand the cost of wear and tear, taxes, cash flow, politics, and hardships that people go through. I mean, for Shannon to make this comment, being a tenant, I mean, it just, speaks volumes to, who she is as a person. She's obviously very caring. And, this comment is not self-fulfilling. She wants to be a homeowner, right? But she still acknowledges the fact that landlording, we want to weaponize, we want to think that landlords are all bad across the board. And a lot of mom and pops have made it possible for people like Shannon, who have been unable to buy, to get rooted in a community, in a home for 20 years. And finally, guys, here's a question. Are there going to be foreclosures coming onto the market? I know a lot of people have heard about how so many people have been delinquent in their mortgages. We've had mortgage eviction moratoriums over the last several years. We've had forbearance programs where homeowners didn't have to pay their mortgage for 6 months. We've watched stimulus being handed out to homeowners that were struggling to pay their housing related costs. Some households got up to $50,000 here in Maryland. That's what was available available for a household to pay their housing related costs. And also, we've watched a recasting of 30-year FHA and VA mortgages into 40-year loans, reducing payments. And then we watched the Biden administration sign into effect a plan where borrowers could take 30% of their defaulting loan, their mortgage, and dump it on the back end in an interest-free second mortgage to help borrowers be able to afford their mortgage payments still after years of stimulus. And now we're seeing where FHA is acknowledging almost 10% delinquency rates in FHA. They're now, hoping that by the end of the year, they're going to implement this new program to stop foreclosures in FHA by reducing yet still the amount of the mortgage payment for the borrower for a minimum of 3 to potentially the maximum of 5 years, reducing their payment that they have to pay every month. So, will we see foreclosures? I think that we will see foreclosures, but I think that the government at this point is going to do everything they can in their power to stop them. The real question here, guys, and I've talked about this a lot on the show, is will they pay people to fix up their homes? Because as we know, homes kind of fall apart when you don't keep up with repairs, replace heating systems, replace the faulty roofs, leaky roofs. And so even despite the fact of dropping mortgage payments for people that can't afford to make the payment, so you drop it to a payment that they can afford, how will they magically be able to have tens of thousands of dollars to invest in the house, to keep it safe, to keep it in operating order? That's where I believe we're going to have more stimulus, or it doesn't matter what the government does. These people are still going to end up moving out of their homes, and we may see distressed property even worse condition than we did back in the great financial crisis. Anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, you can let me know that you did by hitting that thumbs up. And as always, guys, keep those comments coming. You may be on next week's Real Estate Q&A. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, consider doing so now. Hit the alert bell. You'll know every time we upload content just like this. And the biggest compliment that you can do for us here at Sachs Realty is share this video with your family and friends so they can be informed on everything real estate. See you next time. Sachs Realty, Maryland broker number 607720, office number 443-318-4514, equal housing opportunity.